Welcome to AM Insider, a production of our own. In this podcast, we will have a series of informative discussions tackling the adoption of additive manufacturing, answering those burning questions and swapping experiences. Learn from experienced individuals on how innovation can push the boundaries of what is possible. Hey, and welcome to the podcast. My name is Justin Hopkins, and with me here as always is Dustin Klumpkin. Let's get inside AM.
It's funny when you're talking about the start of 3D printing. I'm not sure if Stratasys used the term first, to be honest.
Okay.
Because when you said that somebody at Stratasys was in the room, I kind of remember a little bit before we got to that point, because I think what you're talking about, well, I don't know what time frame would have been where you would have heard that was said in a room. But I do recall in the 90s, first of all, I think even at MIT, I think the term 3D printing had been used when they developed the technology that went on to become the Z Corp and, of course, X1 or whoever's doing the metal printing now. So I'm not sure if Stratasys was the first or not, but I think Stratasys probably popularized it more than anybody, even if it wasn't. So we might want to do a quick search online and see where that term 3D printing shows up, because the first time we probably would have talked about it probably well before that time that you're mentioning, but it never really became something that we latched onto until a certain point when we had at least the Genesis in the market, or especially when we introduced Dimension, right? When we had created this kind of new market segment of under $100,000 now 3D printers, but additive machines, which were actually viable, right? The Genesis, it didn't last terribly long in terms of success, but the Dimension obviously was way more successful. And I think one of the reasons why it got popularized as a term at that moment in time had more to do with, I think, this is my personal opinion, it had a lot to do with the fact that Stratasys needed to have a differentiation between, a $30,000 or $50,000 additive machine and a $250,000 additive machine, right? Because it was a little bit difficult to see the difference, especially over 20 years ago, when you look at all the offerings. Well, there wasn't many offerings, but there were enough offerings of additive machines back then. But for somebody coming in and saying, "Hey, we need to get into this rapid prototyping," they're confused, right? Here's a $50,000 product if you just focus on the U.S., and here's a $200,000 or $250,000 product. Something between a Dimension and an FDM 8000 at the time, or even Maxim was out there, Quantum. So, in a way, I think one of the reasons why it wasn't, not because why it was invented, because I think actually some different people may have said it over different times. I think Stratasys probably has to be credited with making it more widely adopted. And the reason was because we had to teach the salespeople, first of all, we created a separate channel for Dimension, but then we needed to not cannibalize each other, right? We had a direct sales force selling, over $100,000 additive devices, and now they're competing against a product they can't sell, made by the same company, the same technology, and now it's sold by resellers. So we had to teach everybody, no matter who you were in our sales chain back then, because we didn't use indirect, at least in the United States, right? We didn't use indirect for the big boxes. We used direct for big boxes at that time. So we had to teach not only the American two different channels, but then potentially international channels which sold the same product. They actually could sell both products. And we had to help them differentiate when they talk to a customer why they should justify spending $100,000 more for a slightly bigger machine that looks like it's doing the same thing. So I would say we may have coined it, but I think we should do some more research on it before making that claim. But we certainly popularized it at the first level. And the first level in my opinion, well, maybe it's the second level. The first level might be, let's say if Z Corp might have used that term at some point in time, especially because of the naming of MIT. But then we had to make this differentiation. So that's called at least the second moment in time when it took a big jump towards being heard and being known. But it still wasn't that popular. It was popular because somebody who said, I want to talk to you about buying a rapid prototyping machine, says, what's the difference between a Dimension and an 8000? And you go, how do I describe this? So we came up with a training class, as you know, Craig will probably tell you, when we come up with Dimension University. And eventually we had a number of different sales training classes in Stratasys. But we taught people in Dimension University to treat the value or create the value in a part that you hold in your hand, partially based on attributes. So attributes might be accuracy. We wanted, of course, the more expensive machines to come across as faster, more accurate, more materials. And of course, we didn't have more materials really back then. I mean, we did, but a little bit, only one or two, not like, a whole pallet. And so it was hard for a customer who's still trying to navigate what is this rapid prototyping thing, how to know what to buy. And so we started to call the Dimension 3D printer and 3D prints, and we would emphasize to people, it produces models. It doesn't make parts. That was Craig's idea.
Huh.
And he would say, let's call them models. And we used to make people pay $1 every time they called something a part in a training class, a sales training class. We'd make them put money like in a swear jar if they used the wrong term. And the reason was because we figured if you said model, it put it forth as a prototype, not with the same kind of value you would put on a part. A part, we would say it like a part, like George Carlin would say, baseball's played on a diamond, and baseball's played on a diamond, and NFL football is played on a gridiron. So we tried to differentiate that what is produced on a Dimension 3D printer is a 3D print. It's a model. But if you go to an FDM 8000 or a Quantum, it's the big version of this, and it makes more accurate, more repeatable, more expandable, faster, bigger, and that's rapid prototyping or additive manufacturing. And in a similar time frame, I think a lot of the industry, several times during the first probably 20 years, let's say from 1990 to 2010, several times I think people have tried to influence the naming of the industry. People didn't like rapid prototyping. There was one guy who called it fabbing, or fabber. He was one of he competed with Terry Wohlers to be a consultant in the industry back in the day, started his own company at some point, but he called it a fabber. And there was freeform fabrication. You can look up all the terms that people came up with over that 20-year period. I almost said the first 20 years, but it really started in 86. But even then, the first 20 years, 86 to 2006, and people tried to align on a terminology for the industry because it started, every time the industry took a turn and added a capability, I think it became obvious to people that we needed different terms to help people identify exactly what they were looking at. And so I think, don't count on this, but I want to say somewhere in the mid to noughties, they call them the noughties, right? Somewhere in there, I thought that like various people with a vested interest, such as, at Rapid or people who belong to that group and a few other groups in the additive business, wanted to call the whole industry additive manufacturing, just changed that. And we started kind of saying it, right? Mm-hmm. Then when the first FDM patent ran out, if you think about it, and you had the FDM kit machines being produced, where was it, Ireland or Scotland, wherever, I forgot who did it. Forgot the name right now of the entity.
What do you mean by the kit? I haven't heard that.
Well, I forget when it was, 2007 or 8. It might have been like rep wrap or something like that.
Maybe MCore, is that who you're thinking of? MCore?
No, I'm not thinking of MCore because that was a specific technology. That wasn't FDM technology.
Right.
But no, what I'm thinking of is that the first kind of quantum step towards a more consumer or prosumer sort of thing happened when one of the first, around the time when one of the early FDM patents had expired. And I think a company, it was somewhere in the area I just mentioned, we have to look up the name, but had come out with an FDM kit where you could buy a kit and assemble your own machine.
And
I've
never heard of that.
I thought it was rep wrap, but it might have been. I have to look at who the first prosumer extrusion machine was and come up and do a little research on that name, because I don't want to say fake stuff. So don't use this until we look it up. But if you remember, about the time of the Great Recession was a similar time to when a lot of these small companies making copycat FDM machines started happening, right? And that was maybe a year or two after this first kit project came out. And then that's when the seeds of this, hey, FDM could be, could be developed for lower cost, lower price, and sold to consumers. And we're clearly sell a lot of machines, right? And a lot of companies started about them. I mean, way more started 5 or 10 years later. But a lot of companies started to try to sell these mini FDM machines. And there were Chinese companies selling them for $300, these little tiny things. There was, people like Ultimaker started back in the day with, FDM based and MakerBots and stuff like that. They may not have started in 2007, but they weren't the first. And anyway, my point about this wasn't who plays the game, but my point was more about the term 3D printing. Because I think what kind of happened, and this is kind of a circuitous discussion, but you could go back and we could talk about the 90s, and this would come back to the circle. And what started happening in like 2008 or whatever, when tech writers wanted to write about things, and all of a sudden some non-tech magazines, some more mainstream places started to say, hey, look at this cool thing that's making these 3D prints. And so somebody would start calling it a 3D printer. Maybe I'm not because of Stratasys necessarily, but it was pretty easy for people who are getting into this new space, right? This low-cost prosumer, consumer, whatever space. And they may have started latching on to what Stratasys was talking about, 3D print, and maybe they were using it too. I don't know. I don't know who said what. But the point is the industry wanted to call itself something else. And all of a sudden, and now this is only my opinion, but all of a sudden in the late 90s, we have some non-technical magazines and publications and newspapers started to write about, oh, look at this miraculous company who just started, who's making these, for lack of a better word, 3D printers, and it's the new wave for the home, the new gadget. And all of a sudden the whole industry started getting some attention because think about it, for the first 20 years of existence, this was all about very high-priced capital equipment that was only purchased by professional companies, the Fords, you know who they are, and you go, oh, why would USA Today care about that, or whoever a magazine or a newspaper would be? But all of a sudden, when they start seeing that there's this exciting thing that might actually explode, everything 3D is, for the last 20, 30 years, anything 3D is popular. You can walk into the grocery store and you see 3D on the side of Crest toothpaste. 3D is so popular that all of a sudden somebody or some buddies, different writers, whatever, started seeing that there's this thing happening where people can make whatever they want. It's like Back to the Future, or it's like, Star Trek and the replicator machine. And oh my God, people can buy these for a couple $1,000s. And all of a sudden they started writing about them. And guess what term they use? They call it 3D printing. And all of a sudden, I feel like the industry kind of lost its ability to call it what it wanted. All of a sudden, it was the media who massively popularized the term. They didn't create it; they just latched onto it. And I feel like in the late 2000s, somewhere between 8 and 10, is when you saw a lot of these articles started happening, and it was a lot easier to explain to somebody something called 3D printing than to say rapid prototyping. For the same reason we wanted to sell a 3D printer versus rapid prototyping, it wasn't going to make a lot of sense to people reading, a mainstream newspaper who weren't in technology or who weren't, in the type of technology as deep as we are, and them understand it. They say rapid prototyping, the next article, rapid prototyping, next article. But you say 3D printing, and people are like, "Oh, let me see what this is about." And so basically, I think it was the media, in my opinion, my humble opinion, it was the media who actually caused the term 3D printing to become the popular description of what we do. And what was interesting about that is, I believe if you look back at stock prices and stuff, look at the recovery out of the Great Recession. Like, obviously, a lot of companies in the 3D space, if you look at public information of stock prices, you can watch how they navigated the last 25 years. And I believe it was coming out of that Great Recession that 3D printing as an industry basically emerged with a name that it had no control over. It was whoever's going to call it that is who's going to call it that. And so we started calling everything that. We no longer, I don't remember us still trying to make a huge difference between, a $20,000 printer and a $300,000 printer by name only. Now we had to use the name and maybe fortify a little bit by still kind of focusing on the output being different. Manufacturing output is different than lab output or prototyping output. But it was 3D printing. Do you sell 3D printers? Do you sell 3D printers? And if you look, I think even at stock prices, you'll notice that I think the 3D printing industry, even at shippable units, well, you have to normalize the shippable units, because if you started counting $2,000 printers, it kind of skews the number real quick, and 10 years ago. But if you're able to even normalize and look at people who weren't selling $3,000 printers, I feel like the whole industry got a big boost right then, because everybody's writing about it, right? Mm-hmm. And and then it went down again, 10 years ago. We have ebbs and flows, right? And then it went up again, maybe a couple of years ago, and right now it's kind of down. But anyway, I think in the whole, what's in the name is kind of important. And I think in a funny way, the consumer space helped give a kick in the butt to the broader commercial space, maybe just because of awareness. So I thought that was really fun to see all that happen. It was weird at the time because we had to demonstrate why we were, a $30,000 or $50,000 dimension. Let's call it 30 back at that point. Why a $30,000 dimension was better than, a $2,000 MakerBot, for example.
Yeah.
It was still a challenge.
Thanks for listening, and if you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please share it with others, post about it on social media, or leave a rating and review. To catch all the latest from AM Insider, you can follow us on LinkedIn at AM Insider, or send us an email at justin@aminsider.org or dustin@aminsider.org. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.